these businesses that are going to be created because of it,
That's
right, have the first opportunities
Yes.
are given to those that were impacted by the criminalization
That's exactly
of marijuana.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, what else are you up to, girl? You're moving, you're getting it done. Hey.
So I mean, for your viewers that don't know, what my work is on in the House and what committees I'm on. So let me just give them a little briefing, right?
Yes, please.
So I serve on 3 committees in the House. I'm one of few that has 3 committees. Generally, you get to serve on 1 or 2. 3 is often done by an ask. And I wanted to be on 3 committees because all 3 were equally important to me, and I felt like equally important to the diverse constituents that I serve, and the perspective, right, the unique perspective that I bring to the House.
That's exactly right, and
Yeah.
I think that's why you are on 3, because you are very unique, and your perspective, like I said, is needed at this time and in this moment, in this point in history. It is perfect.
Thank
so
you.
What
and so I serve on education and labor, and as many people know or might not know, Minnesota's 5th is one of the youngest districts in Congress. And so it was important for me to sit on education and labor to make sure that we were making the proper investments in education, that we were investing in higher ed, that we were investing in career preparedness, that we were investing in the education gap and skills gap that exists as we transition people into 21st century employment. And I wanted to make sure, as a former labor member, I used to be an AFSCME member, that I could make sure, that I could have my voice there to make sure that, our union brothers and sisters were getting their fair shake, right. That we were strengthening the labor standards we have in this country and abroad, that we were going to have trade agreements and negotiations with other countries that will make sure that the solidarity of working people was intact. And, I also sit on foreign affairs, which everybody gets to hear about. And in foreign affairs, I serve on oversight subcommittee, which deals with oversight over our State Department, which gives me the opportunity to look at how we are doing with foreign aid, what requirements we're adding to the foreign aid that we give out to other countries. Are we focusing on humanitarian aid or developmental aid? And how can we make it be proportional? And I also sit on the Africa subcommittee. As the first Africa-born member in Congress, it was important for me to be there because, as I say this constantly in the committee, Africa has always been talked about,
yes,
has always been deliberated, has always been scapegoated.
Exactly.
But we've never had an African to
that.
actually speak,
imagine that
right,
happening.
and say, right, Africa wants and needs partnership,
Exactly.
right? Africa is tired of,
from an African perspective.
Yeah, Africa
Absolutely.
is tired of not being asked what they need and being told what they need. Africa is tired of having the colonial mindset and imperialistic mindset drive its policies, and Africa wants to make sure that it has its rights fully intact as a sovereign country individually in the 54 nations that make up the African continent, and that when we are coming up with a policy, whether it is in regards to defense, diplomacy, or development, that we are in conversations with these African nations to make sure that we are channeling our energy and our resources in ways that will help Africa reach its prosperity as a full partner in the world. There's a huge youth pulse in Africa. Over 50% of the world's population is soon to be African, and if we are not, really paying attention to that in making sure that we are partnering with them in education, that we are partnering with them in their fight against terrorism, that we are partnering with them in their fight to create economic stability, then, right, as we were talking about earlier, we are going to bear the burden of not having a generation of young people prepared to lead the world.
Exactly.
And then my third committee is budget. And that's the one I had asked for to be added on because, there are negotiations that take place every single day in the halls of Congress. Everybody will say a budget is a statement of individuals' value. It's a statement of our party. And it's a statement of Congress. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that statement had the voices of marginalized people. That statement had our need for investment in the things that are priority to us: housing, healthcare, education, youth development, and without that, I didn't feel like that committee would have the insight of only not a young person, but somebody who also represented a district that had majority young people who would be leading our nation and who needed urgent investment to make sure that they were prepared for them.
That's exactly right. I want to just touch on real quick, as I'm sure you're familiar with the all races, classes, and gender struggles that are related in this country. Although in our Minneapolis urban and rural communities, we often see division and animosity between low income and the working class, Native Americans against the African Americans, Somalians, and the Latino Americans, and among Asian Americans. Can you talk a little bit about what things we can do to better repair our relationships? And I understand too that the powers that be want it that way so that they can be successful in to conquer and divide.
Okay.
But we are a team. We're all on the same team, and I think it's real prevalent here in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I mean the conquer and divide model has always worked for certain people, and has not worked, right, for the minorities that are fighting to have their voices at the table, because they know that if we are united, then we could be powerful, and you could see it happen between the Native Americans, the first Americans,
Exactly.
and the new Americans, which
Hello.
is the
That's
Somali
right.
community and East African community at large, the Oromo community, the Ethiopian community, and that's beneficial because if these two communities join, they could collectively, speak to the issues that they have in the Phillips, Power Horn, see the Riverside and Seward
Yes.
area. They could come up with solutions together,
West Bank.
and yeah, right. They could be powerful voice,
Yes.
but that doesn't really benefit the people that want to hold power over us, and so they want to make sure that they're amplifying our divisions and our fights and our misunderstandings. And so there is an effort really to create unity that has been underway for many years. It hasn't always been consistent, but there are people who are committed to that. When I was younger in high school, I used to attend a meeting with other first Americans, Native Americans, as a Somali American living in Cedar Riverside, where we would have conversations about our aspirations and dreams and how we could move forward together as members of one society. And those conversations have continued over the years. This is 20 years ago. I'm not as young as I look. And they've continued. And just as I did a roundtable with the Native American community in celebration of Native American Heritage Month, they were talking to me about figuring out how to go back to having those conversations and bring those two communities together. You'll also see that division amplified between the African immigrant community and the African American community, who are descendants of slaves, who have historical trauma, who have generational trauma, who have lived with the burdens of a racialized system that has always put them at the bottom of everything, right? Dead last. But we are visibly black, and right now also get to be part of this system that also sees us and doesn't see our full humanity. Although we do get the benefit of being an immigrant and newer to the country and have access to a system in a way that is different, because we don't come with that historical trauma, with that generational trauma, right? We don't have a history and legacy of enslavement, and so there is perpetuated animosity. There are divisions that a lot of people would like to foster and harbor, that isn't beneficial to both of these communities, because at the end of the day, we are brothers and sisters. We visibly look the same and are treated by the system the same. And so you will see my son at the tender age of 14 will have the similar interactions with the police. And be visibly threatening to them as the African American youth who's the same age as him would be. But the forces that be want us to make sure that we are not connecting on those same anxieties, and we are not putting our resources together, our voices together to say the violence in our communities is one that we can collectively overcome. This, opioid epidemic that is touching both of our communities is one that we could collectively overcome. The housing crises that exists in both of our communities is one that we could collectively overcome. The resource gap that exists in our communities and the disinvestment is one that we can collectively overcome. And there are few of us who have, again, for years tried to collectively come together to, make sure that we were all advocating on each other's behalf. There used to be this African American reunion that we would do. We would have barbecues here in North Minneapolis with Reverend McAfee in a church nearby. And my brother Bihi would host us in Cedar Riverside at the Brian Coyle Center. And Abdallah,
I was at one of those.
who is Liberian, would host us over in the Brooklands to invite us to Prince Church over there. And so this was the initial beginnings of building a community. And then something happened where that wasn't fully continuing in the way that it was. I know many of us are still connected, and I hope that we do reconnect and start refostering those relationships and working together in trying to make sure that our voices are collectively at the table, that we are leveraging it in a powerful way to benefit all of us.
And that's absolutely right, Representative. And speaking on the misunderstandings between the Somali and Somali and the African American community here in Minneapolis, we just I want to send a shout out to the elder who was hit in the head getting off the bus. And I knew one of his sons, and was very familiar with that family, and I want to send a special shout out to them. And that's one of the things that we got to really kind of build more connectivity with the community and with ourselves, because I think that there has to be obviously something missing.
Yeah.
Clearly, because any knucklehead that's 23 years old that thinks it's okay, I don't care if black, white, red, brown, that thinks it's okay to hit a 75-year-old man. I mean, what's wrong with you? So, and I think all of that goes back to the young brother needs a hug, and clearly he's not getting enough love and attention or understanding, because it's just, it was completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, it really breaks your heart, right, to see that, because at the end of the day, these are neighbors. These are people who should understand each other's pain, each other's struggles.
And instead of that fool hitting the elder, can I help you off the bus, sir?
Right. I mean, and also like people who come from cultures, right, that respect elders, that uplift elders, that support one another,
that cherish their
right,
elders,
that cherish their elders.
That
used to be part of the conversation. The Native American community is very elder oriented.
Absolutely.
The Somali American community is very elder oriented. Right, the African American community, the Asian community, the Latino community.
Yes.
We are not people who disregard their elders. We're not. We don't have a throwaway culture for our elders.
Isn't it funny though?
We hold their wisdoms.
And isn't it funny how these nursing homes were created and who's predominantly in those nursing homes? Because that's not really something I believe in at all. And that's just me personally.
Because we were raised with the responsibility to raise those that raise us.
Exactly.
Right? And so when I hear about a story of a young man who attacks an elder just because they look different,
or ask them to be quiet. It wasn't any disrespect, man.
and
Lower your voice, loudmouth.
No,
and be
exactly.
quiet.
I mean, and we were all raised, right, in a community where the elder tells you what to do, regardless if they were related to you or not.
And
you were afraid to look back at them and even give them like a certain kind of look.
Every woman on the block had the right to tell me, boy,
yes.
Or I'm calling your mom.
Right, and it doesn't matter where you grow up, right? That was my life in Somalia, and here in Minneapolis, you were being chased by, every woman on the block, as I was by every woman on the block in Somalia. And so that's I think what comes out of these conversations, because we get to bread, we get to share meals, we get to share stories, and we ultimately realize that our cultures are deeply connected. And go beyond our geography, go beyond our races, go beyond our religions. We have more in common than we don't. What connects us is much stronger than what separates us. And this is why at the rally with Bernie Sanders, I talked about this deep solidarity, this deep understanding of each other's pain and struggles, because it's really important for us to realize that each other's destinies are connected.
Absolutely.
Right?
And
like my win should always be a win for you.
Exactly.
And your win should always be a win for me.
And true story, my loss is a loss for you, and your loss is a loss for me.
Right.
So I mean, if we together we shine.
Right, together we shine.
Yes.
Together we shine. Yeah.
Well, is there anything, you got any shout outs? Anybody want to shout out?
Well, shout out to all of my constituents. Everyone really that is doing the hard work of uplifting our communities. There are a lot of unspoken heroes and sheroes in our community, the mothers and fathers who are struggling every single day to raise their children in the best way that they can. the people who are holding it down for their family members that are incarcerated, and the missing members of our community, for every single person who is living with the trauma and the pain of having their family member face deportation or be deported.
Yes.
I want to
clowns raising the fee from $750 to $1,125. I mean, that's
it's
a person's
insane.
that's a month of wages
Right.
to try to get there. You know, and you still got to pay the lights, gas, feed your kids. I mean,
or for every and to every member of our community who's waiting to be reunited with their loved ones because of the Muslim ban and and the lowered quotas that we now have for refugee for the refugee program. There are so many people every single day, whether they are of the transgender community, whether they are the LGBTQ community, whether they are, part of the Latino community, the Somali community, the African American community, that are faced with so much atrocities.
Yes.
But they get up every day,
and
try to be the best human
nice
and community member
yes.
that they could be, and they show up for their vulnerable community members. And I salute them, and I do this work on their behalf. People tell me every day, with everything that you're faced with, Ilhan, how do you still continue to work? And for me, I feel very privileged to do the work that I love on behalf of the people that I love. But I also realize that I am doubly privileged because I get to do this work of speaking about justice and human rights and equal rights, with the protection of being a member of Congress and having resources to have security and all of that.
Yes.
When I know that there are people every single day who do and speak about the same work that I do without that protection,
That's
whether
right.
they are living abroad, dealing with authoritarian regimes and dictatorships, or they are living here, living under the current tyrant that we have in the White House, or living under an oppressive system that doesn't really allow them to have access to the full rights guaranteed and enshrined in our Congress. I salute all of those people who don't give up, who don't say this is someone else's job, this is someone else's work, but they put their neck on the line, their bodies on the line. I know that it's only been a year from when we had 2 years now, 4 years. Oh my goodness, time has flown. 4 years since we had the encampment here for Jamar Clark. And I know that there were community members every single day who showed up, who put their lives on the line to make sure that justice.
And for Philando
right,
as well.
And for Philando.
And then again, the result is just catastrophic.
Exactly. And for every member of our community who was taken unjustly. It doesn't really make any sense that in the United States we have people who are taken by police and our system with impunity, who have somebody play judge and jury and executioner.
All in the same breath.
And it is one of the hardest things to explain to my friends and to the people that I'm